So as you can see, this is a map. I'm going to step in front of it. A map of Israel, or what we call the Holy Land. We have Syro-Phoenicia up here. You hear me talking about the Phoenicians a lot. The Phoenicians are always up north. The Samaritans are in the middle. Samaria, and then we have Judea down here, Judah. These are the Judean mountains. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. But what I want you to notice first is Jerusalem is right here, and Bethlehem is right there. A lot of people think that Bethlehem and Jerusalem are far ways apart, but they're not. They're 7 miles apart. Bethlehem is 7 miles south of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is on a mountaintop, on a hilltop. There's a bit of a valley. On the north side of Jerusalem is the Kidron Valley, which everyone is very familiar with. On the south side of Jerusalem is another Auric Valley. And on the other side of that is Bethlehem, up on a mountaintop itself. Bethlehem and Jerusalem are the highest places in all of Israel, on the very top of the highest peaks of the Judean mountains. The Judean mountains. So they're very close. But what I want to show you here is Nazareth is where our story really kind of starts, up here in Nazareth. Nazareth, Mary is visited by Gabriel. We have the Magnificat and all of that. And then she's going to go from there, and she's going to come over here, probably close to Magdala, where she's going to stay with her family while she is pregnant. And then Joseph's going to pick her up, and they're going to take her down the Jordan River Valley, and then over to Bethlehem. So Judith was just talking about the Mount of Transfiguration. That's here at Mount Tabor. We have Nazareth, Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. So Bethlehem and Jerusalem are actually quite close. They're quite close. Okay. So why this? For 100 miles, roughly 107 miles from Bethlehem, 100 miles from Jerusalem. So people often ask, why does God set his story here? That's a great question. Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Pangea, I'm sure many of you know about Pangea. Pangea is what the earth was before the continents break apart, right? And we know the continents break apart. Many people, different people, creationalists, scientists, theologians, naturalists, all have different opinions on when it broke apart. Some people say it was when the earth was struck. You know, we believe Satan struck the earth. And so when it was struck, some people say it was during the flood. And many people can differ on that. But the important part is when you push everything together, at the very center that we see is right here. This is the center of Pangea. It's the center, literally, of the known world. Second reason is, this is Israel here. You have Europe. You have, at the time, Northern Africa, which is a major kingdom, right? You have a major kingdom here. You have a major kingdom up here in Italy called Rome. Major kingdom down here in Egypt. You have major kingdoms over here in India and China. And then you have up here, beginning on the Black Sea, some Germanic tribe movement and a lot of trading taking place. Well, the big thing about the trading taking place is that all of the routes go through here. All of the routes go through here. For one reason or another, either water, desert, or whatever the reason is, it goes through here. And more specifically, it literally goes right here. And there's a reason, because that 100 miles, roughly 125 miles that you have to pass through, on this side is desolate desert. On this side is pretty much deserty region, and there's no fresh water to speak of except for coming down the mountain range. This is the Judean mountain range right here. You see some of it's topographical. But this area right here is a small oasis. It's a small oasis, otherwise between this kind of unbearable path that you have to cross to go to one of the four for trading or for whatever else. But you have this Jordan River Valley. Some of you have been there with me. It's an oasis, right? Where are my people at? I don't know where you are. It's an oasis. Still don't know. If somebody pointed to one, I don't know where you are.
Lola's over there.
Lola, it's an oasis,
Yes,
right?
it is.
Beautiful. So much fruit, produce grown there. I don't know. It's the closest thing to heaven you're going to see. You have this fresh water coming from the Jordan River Valley, and you have farm after farm after farm producing everything from bananas to melons to every other kind of fruit to vegetables to grapes and dates, and it's unbelievable, really. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, the Sea of Galilee here, for whatever reason, has a mineral content higher than any other place in the world. Scientists still don't quite know why, but what we do know is that in the Sea of Galilee, and I've said this many times, is the most prolific place of life on earth. Most prolific place of life on earth. In that square mileage of the Sea of Galilee, per square mile, there's more life than anywhere else in the world. Just by everything from algae, all the way up to fish, all the way up to birds, and things like that, right here. It's this water, for whatever reason, is this high mineral content. No one still knows exactly why. And the amazing thing is that this high mineral contented water travels down the Jordan River into the Dead Sea. And what's in the Dead Sea? Nothing. Nothing. Death, destruction, nothing. Cody's and Marie and I, someday we're going to do it. Our bowling league, whenever we have a bowling league, we're going to be called the Dead Sea Fishermen. Dead Sea Fishermen. But nothing. And no one can tell, till to this day, there's no one that can explain why water that runs from the highest contented minerals in the world goes down this short river passage. It's a shallow, fast-moving river, goes into here, and there's nothing. The Bible explains a little bit, but we don't have really the Hebrew explanation expounding past something that happened right here. A little place called Sodom and Gomorrah, where salt and fire seemingly through the story was rained down. And we know that Sodom and Gomorrah was now there. Archaeologists have proven that there was a civilization there that was consumed by some type of a high heated fire, but that's all we can tell. And really the story is so old, and that book is so old, that's really all we find, other than the salt pillars that are left and then the salt that's in the Dead Sea. But no one can explain it. There's some really neat things, and we'll go on from here. What's really neat is, right here is the baptismal side of Jesus. The baptismal side of Jesus, where Jesus is baptized. It's also where the Jews crossed into the Promised Land. It's in the same place, right here. And the amazing thing about baptism and the idea of baptism is what? Is that we come into this baptismal water, you and I, figuratively here at the baptismal font, or in real life for those who go to the Jordan River with us. You come here, and God does what? He washes our sins away, right? And so all this life-giving water washes the sins off of us, and then death follows into this lake. It's pretty neat. God says he puts his thumbprint on everything, and I truly believe he does. So, Mary goes from here to here. She waits it out. Joseph is going to take her down here. Why? Because you don't want to go through a mountain range. You don't want to come over here because there's no fresh water. There's nothing to eat. Down here is lots of food, vegetation, fresh water, easy to walk. And so you walk down the Jordan River Valley and you come out here. At one time, this is the most traveled place in the world. The most traveled place in the world. Petra is right over here, where we studied 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago when we talked about Exodus. Petra was right over here, where they had the storeholds of the trading. Why? Because all the trading took place here. So when God set the scene to go all over the world, he did so in two different places. One, literally in the middle of our known world, and 2, where everything was going. Coming and going, coming and going, right? Coming and going. There's a shallow river spot right here. That was a crossing area where John the Baptist was doing his baptisms and his preaching.
How wide is that Kidron Valley?
Very wide at the bottom. At the top, it's very narrow. So at the very top, the Kidron Valley goes up into Jerusalem, and we'll look at that more when we get to Jerusalem. But the garden of Gethsemane is on one side, and then there's kind of just like a steep kind of culvert, and then it goes up to the outer wall of Jerusalem. And that you can literally see the beginning of the valley. And then it cuts for about 70 miles all the way down to the Jordan River. And it gets very wide. It gets very wide. This is Bethlehem today. Bethlehem today. Very sad. You see this. This is the wall that's built around the city by Israel. I know Israel is a touchy subject. And while as Americans we support Israel, I cannot support what they do to the Palestinian Christians. It's deplorable. They're walled off in a city. Kind of imagine if we just walled off Atlanta because we didn't like the people that were in Atlanta, or we didn't want them kind of expounding. That's what's happening to them now. They're in a walled off city. Bethlehem is a walled off city. Right now, about a little under half of the population is Christian. In 1992, almost 98% were Christian. But Israel came to a deal with then President Clinton to give a bunch of visas to Christians, Palestinian Christians, to leave the country to go to the northern states, mostly around Detroit area, and then Canada did the same thing. And there was a mass exodus, but it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing for Bethlehem. Bethlehem is a very important city, right, for Christians, and the dynamic in Bethlehem is very strange right now because of that. This is a depiction of what Bethlehem would have looked like when Jesus was born. You can see kind of the rocky, mountainous area. One thing that is really neat is the Judean mountain range looks quite a bit a lot like the mountain range. I can't remember the one that goes kind of through Big Bend. Very similar to that. Very similar. And the weather patterns in Jerusalem and Bethlehem are almost exactly like Austin, almost to the T. If you, at any day, if you click over to Jerusalem, it'll be almost exactly the temperature we have. So in the winter, it gets very cold, sometimes freezing. In the summer, it's very, very hot. But they're on the same area of the world, kind of longitude, latitude we are, just on the other side. And so the temperature is almost exactly like it. So, you've heard some people will say, oh, I just can't stand the nativity scenes where they're cold. Well, it's cold in the winter in Bethlehem. They're on the top of a mountain range. It's very cold. It's very cold. It snows every couple of years in Bethlehem, just like it does here. And actually, when we had the week-long snow, they didn't get a week-long snow, but it did snow. The first day that we got snow, it snowed there. I called my friend Mo, and we were saying, it's snowing in Texas and Jerusalem.
That clip right there looks like the Lion King.
yeah, it does. Hey, it's very pertinent. Maybe Joseph held up Jesus. That's what a good depiction of what it would have looked like. A good analogy of this is they would have been up here, probably actually in a cave off to the side here. You go down the valley, and who would have been down here in the valley? The shepherds, right? The shepherds are down in the valley. When the angels come, they say, go back up, see the Lord has been born. Okay, so this is present day street view of Bethlehem. I just want you to see some of the different places. The Church of Holy Family is really beautiful. Bethlehem University is a major Christian university with a seminary. It's somewhat world renowned. I have some very good friends there. One of the professors of New Testament, does a personal tour for our groups through the Church of the Nativity where Jesus was born. And he has kind of full access, so we push everybody out. We have the Greek Catholic convent, the Orthodox Church here. Manger Square is right next to where the Church of the Nativity is. That's where Jesus is born. The Armenian monastery. The Manger Square is where they have a giant tree every year, giant Christmas tree. If you ever turn on the news and they show you a big Christmas tree at Christmas time, it's going to be right here in Manger Square. And you'll also notice a Lutheran Christmas church, which is really cool. I was hoping the Morse was going to be here so I could tell him that I can't find the Baptist church. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's okay. The Lutheran church is there. It's actually a very beautiful church. The pastor there is really funny. Let's see. Okay. This is the Church of the Nativity. This is actually the very first known photograph of the Church of the Nativity. But it looks almost exactly like this today, and I'll show you that again. A photograph really wasn't that long ago. This church was built, over 1,800 years ago. But this was a church. You'll notice there's two different sides of it. This is the main part of the church that was originally built. The Orthodox built on this side. The Roman the Catholics built on this side. After the schism, after the split, they built on either side. This is the major one. And in here is the cave, where actually the cave is, that church is sitting on top of the cave that Jesus was born in. And I know people are saying, cave, give me just a second. This is what the church looks like today. Present day, almost exactly the same as you can see. This is the doorway, the main doorway still going into it. I'll show you the door in just a second, but just so you can see, this is the oldest church in Christendom, the Church of the Nativity. The second oldest church was built in Capernaum that we know of. We're talking about structure, right? So the church was meeting at the burial site of Jesus, where the Church Holy Sepulchre is in Jerusalem. We'll talk about that later. But they were meeting there, but they didn't have a structure. This is the very first structured church that was built, and they started building it approximately 30 to 35 years after the resurrection of Jesus. People often say, why did they wait 30, 35 years, right? You'll get the people that say, see, they waited. They waited that long for two reasons. Number one, because before that, they were meeting in the synagogue still. Remember, the Jews, for the most part, converted to Christians. And it wasn't until kind of the high kind of ranking Jewish chief priests said, man, in some of our synagogues, they've all become Christians. They all believe in the Messiah. They all worship the Messiah. And they were very worried. The Romans were starting to kind of get weary of them. And so they kicked all the Christians out of the synagogues. Kicked them all out. So when they kicked them all out, they started building structures. The very first one that they started to build was here at the Church of the Nativity. And that's important for a reason I'll show you at the very end. This is an in-depth look at the Church of the Nativity, where Jesus was born. The Church of the Nativity, you'll see this is where the cave was, and I'll show you that in a minute. But where the cave was is right here, over where the altar is. There's actually not a hole. This is like a church, and you go over here and go underneath to it. But you come in through this door, and this is the main part of the church. On this side is the Orthodox. On this side is the Roman Catholic side. And so they both use this at alternating times. And then you see the grotto of St. Jerome. St. Jerome. We'll talk about that in a minute. Anybody tell me, what did St. Jerome do? Anyone tell me? And St. Jerome in 321 goes into the cave where Jesus was born, and he translates the Hebrew and the Greek Bible into Latin. Why was that a big deal? Because most of the people in the world did not speak Hebrew or Greek, but everyone who was educated at the time spoke Latin. So he translates, he goes into the cave, he spends a good portion of his life, we're talking years and years and years, I think it was like 17 years, translating this into Latin, from the Septicum into Latin. And Saint Jerome is buried here, still at the grounds. Saint Jerome came from Croatia, originally came from Croatia, and is still buried there. This is the side, that's the Roman Catholic side. You'll see a couple of things. That is Saint Jerome here. Inside here is the birthplace, is next to it. The birthplace is over here. But that's kind of the outside. A couple of things you'll notice are these are lemon trees. Lemon trees. Last year we had one session on why there would be lemon trees. Can anyone tell me why there would be lemon trees? Who planted the lemon trees? Can anyone tell me that? It happened about 1,000 years after Christ. The Crusaders, everywhere the Crusaders went, they planted lemon trees. They planted lemon trees for a variety of reasons, but one of the main reasons was coming from Europe, they didn't have some of the diseases that they had in the Middle East because of heat and cold and things like that. But what they very quickly found is that citrus would kill all that stuff. So they planted lemon trees everywhere they went, and they used the citrus to clean things and keep them from disease and from getting sick. So you'll find lemon trees anywhere the Crusaders were. This is the door into the Church of the Nativity. The door into the Church of the Nativity has transformed itself greatly. So what you can first see is this beautiful, gargantuous door that kind of went over here at one point. You see this big door. Well, that was this grand opening from the apostolic period. This grand opening into this church. It was a big deal. But then over the years, war happens, right? And so the Crusaders come and they make it like this. They make it like that. Just high enough for a horse to be able to ride into, right? Just high enough for a horse to be able to ride into. And then after the crusading periods, the monks come and they kind of reestablish the door the last time, and they build it way down here, and actually it's about 4 foot high, and they build it like that because they call it a penitent door. And there's many of these throughout the Holy Land, penitent doors, which means in order to come into here, you need to get down on your face. And so to go through there, they actually, you're supposed to get down and as you come in. And you have to, it's important, there's a step up here, and it's not easy to get into the door. You can get in, but you're definitely going to have to kind of look down. Does anybody know, in a movie, it's a special place in my heart of a movie that this inspired? Indiana Jones and the Last Crusades. Remember, only the penitent man shall pass. Only the penitent man shall pass.
Is that why we bow at the altar to go up?
That's kind of one of the reasons, yes. So this is kind of what we think of as the nativity scene, right? This is a very American thing, and I'm not trying to, it's beautiful. We have them all over our house. I think it's gorgeous. This is the American ideal, though, of the nativity, but it's not real. It's not real. It's brought to us courtesy of the Methodist Church, and I'm not to be, this is not to be ugly to the Methodist Church whatsoever. They did it for a reason. John Wesley, the cowboy preacher, comes over from Oxford. He's riding from town to town. He's setting up the Methodist Church, and he's talking to these people who are 3 or 4 generations removed from the old world, right? They're removed from the old world, and so they haven't had trained clergy for 3 or 4 lifetimes, really, at this point. And so the people, for the most part, are sodbusters, farmers, ranchers. They don't know how to read anymore, and their clergy, for the most part, are not trained. And so Wesley's trying to find a way he can connect these Bible stories to them, and then one of the most important ones is the birth of Christ. And so what he does is he tries to give them examples that they would understand. They would not understand a 2,000-year-old cave with a stone manger but they do understand a barn and a wood manger. Does that make sense? And so that's how he explains it. And so 200 years later, or actually 150 years later, here we are in America. We still see this, but if you took this anywhere else outside of the United States, they would think that you were crazy. They would look at you like you were crazy. We're the only ones that do this. That's it. And I love it. We still have a wooden manger out front on our Christmas pageant, and there's something to be said for that. We'll talk about that when we get to Nazareth. One of the neat things in Nazareth is the church, the Basilica of the Announcement, the Magnificat, with the kind of the church dedicated to Mary being told that she's going to have Jesus. One of the things they did was they asked all the countries in the world to send them an art depiction of what they thought Mary looked like. And so you see all over the walls and all over the outside these beautiful depictions of Mary. And what's beautiful is they look like a mother kind of in that country, right? And I think that's amazing. So many people want to fight over, what does Jesus look like? Jesus can look like whatever you want him to look like. We're made in God's image. It's not a cute. Why are we arguing over that? That's kind of crazy. And I think that's beautiful. So we can. That's American apple pie. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's not true. This is more realistic. A cave. And so remember, they're in a mountainous, rocky region. And they had plethoras of cave, and they worked cave. We're not doing, all we're doing at this point in time and civilization is masonry. We're really not working with wood to a great, great extent. We make tents with it, but structurally it's really not to that phase yet. So one thing they can do in mason work, what are you doing? You're cutting stuff out. You're cutting softer rock out. You're making these caves. Anyway, a lot of these caves are natural, and you'll see that in a minute. But it was caves that they put the livestock in. The shepherds would bring the livestock or the sheep, and they would shuttle them into these caves to get out of the weather for nighttime, and they still do it today. And so when it talks about them going, this is what they go into. They go into a cave-like thing, and the manger itself was a stone manger. This is a better depiction of it. This is what it would have looked like. It's a very good picture of what it would have looked like in real life, which is beautiful. It's really neat. I think it's neat for a couple of reasons. Jesus is always, throughout his ministry, he's not one to go sit in the synagogue, right? He does teach from the synagogue, but when he's going to give something big, what does he do? He sits on a hillside, or he goes near a river, or he goes up on the Mount of Olives to look over Jerusalem. Why? Because the creation is his cathedral. Creation, right? And so I think it's pertinent that creation is also his birthplace. It's not a man-made structure, it's creation. So it's quite beautiful. That's kind of a realistic look at what it would have looked like where Jesus was born. This is some of caves that I've been in while I was there. These are natural man-made caves near Bethlehem. So you can still see a lot of these today. These are still there. They're all over the place, to be honest, especially around the Dead Sea. This is what outside one looks like. This is a real one that a shepherd uses to this very day. A shepherd uses this to this very day. You can see some of this canvas, some of it's pulled back, but it'll pull the canvas down when he takes all of the sheep in there and he brings them in. And some of these caves will have kind of different entrances, or sometimes there'll be different caves up the hillside, and 2 or 3 shepherds are bringing their sheep in, right? And remember, Jesus said, "My sheep know me by what? By my voice, right? They hear me." And that's kind of the illusion he's calling, is There's two shepherds bringing sheep up, and he calls for his sheep, and they know exactly where to go. They know exactly where to go. They need to go right in here with their shepherd, right? And so when Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, they hear me, they know me. My sheep know me by name. They're pretty deep, depending. Some of them are very deep. She asked how deep are those caves. This is the same cave that you just saw. This is the interior of the cave that you just saw. You can see where they do their fire over here, right? And the sheep will come in here, and they'll stretch out their little bags, and they'll sleep in there, away from the elements, away from any attackers. So this is a cave that is actively used today by a shepherd 2,000 or so years after Jesus uses one of these caves. Well, Jesus doesn't. Mary and Joseph use one of these caves to birth Jesus. We'll go back to this. So that cave initially is down here. This is on a hillside. They build the church over it, over the cave. They build it over the cave. So imagine you were coming up the hillside here. This was the entrance of the cave. And then they built the church over the top of it. Over the top of it. This is the inside of that main wing of the church. The inside, these are different from different eras. You can see up here, these are some very old artwork. No, I can't think of it. Little tiles. What's the art of little tiles? Mosaic. It's about 1,600 years old. That they started to uncover this Spanish group came in with a new type of instrument that could kind of see into walls. They would never let anybody touch it for the last couple hundred years because the building's very old and it's frail and it's difficult. Well, they went in to look behind some of this plaster and concrete kind of stucco, and they said there's artwork back there. So they're slowly, you can see they're slowly bringing this artwork back, and it's really quite beautiful. And so far you can see most of the disciples on one side. Over here, the disciples are all listed. And then over here, we're not exactly sure what they are yet. They uncovered these artworks that were on top of these marble pillars as well. These marble pillars at one point were painted white. And then some of them, these are marble. We should try to get this off. So as they start to get it off, they find more artwork. Underneath this staircase is another mosaic that's thousands of years old that they're just now uncovering and finding. It's really quite beautiful. Whoa, really quite beautiful. Everything that they're finding in here. There's a documentary. I'll let you know on Sunday. I can't remember the name of it off that you can find on TV, or maybe we can watch it, about the Church of the Nativity, just about the Church of the Nativity. And the guy that's in that leads you through it is the professor of New Testament that works with our tours. He leads us through this, and he'll show you all of this church. But the church is very, very old, as you can see. This is leading you in, and the cave is underneath here. This is the actual sanctuary portion here. Step up just as we do on ours. They're kind of an altar rail. Step up onto it as you go in. On the side, over to the side is this. So this is where, up above here is the sanctuary. This is where that hall would have been coming this way. On the side are these steps going down into the cave where Jesus was born. Into the cave where Jesus was born. So you go down these steps. Sometimes it can be quite crazy. It's like they give you like a couple of hours, or like an hour that people can actually go in there. And so there's 300 people just crammed, just fighting to get in. And we get to go right in, so it's really quite nice. This is down in there. So this is the staircase that you just looked at from up here, coming down. Couple of places that are important here. One, this is the manger that Jesus is laid in, right here. Stone manger. This is the place where it's believed that Jesus was actually born. And on the place that Jesus is born, they have a silver Bethlehem star if anybody's seen a Bethlehem star, you know what I'm talking about. I think I have a picture in a minute. A silver Bethlehem star. In the middle of that is black marble that was brought all the way from the Phoenicians to be placed in that spot. So they have put lots of Italian marble and all this stuff from all over the world since has been brought in and put all over it. But you can see some part of the top, you can see the original kind of parts of the cave. But it's just like we do today. We kind of ruin beautiful nature and things by just building all over stuff, and we don't realize that we're destroying this wonderful thing. At the time, they're thinking, I'm going to bring this beautiful marble in and adorn this. And obviously, I wish they didn't do that now, but 1,000 years ago, they thought they were doing a really neat thing. This is the place where Jesus was born. You can see the silver Bethlehem star with the black marble placed in it. It's kind of customary for married people to hold hands and put their wedding rings on there. I don't know why. No one's been able to tell me why. That's the custom though. Why marriage in Jesus' birthplace is a thing, I don't know. But that's what's customary. So this side over here, like we said, is the manger. This side over here is not, is where he was born. That's the star, the silver star inlaid with that marble. It's really, it's a powerful place to be, obviously. It's a very moving place to be. And then the manger is kind of, unfortunately, covered with marble and locked away. You can see the outlay of the manger as it was, but they adorned it in marble. This is what it would have looked like, right? And they still make these there today. You can go and get these stone mangers. They use them still, these stone mangers. This is the two I'm showing you are archaeological finds. This is another one from the same period. This was actually found a little bit to the east of Jerusalem in another cave, but this is kind of a double manger they have there, kind of a dual feeding area. But it would have looked like that. Jesus would have been laid in that. So Jesus is a baby. He's swaddled and he's laid in a manger. Now, lastly, and this is kind of one thing that's really neat. Can anybody tell me what it is? It's hard to decipher right off the bat, right? Kind of looks like a well. It's the oldest known font in the world. It's the baptismal font. It's the baptismal font. It was filled up for whatever reason that we don't know exactly why. This is this beautiful etched, beautiful three kind of clover looking thing representing the Trinity there. And it's a font, and on the outside of the words of the baptismal, I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, are etched into the outside here. And then at some point they made it smaller, and you would open this. I'm not sure if it was to preserve the water or what, we don't know. But what we do know is this was found in an area of the church, buried way down below. This was part of the very original apostolic church that was built. And the rock dates to the same rock that's the kind of foundation part of the church. And why that's really neat is this, because they had a baptismal font about AD 35, right? The very first built church in the world, the Church of the Nativity, had a baptismal font for baptism. That's pretty cool. It's a pretty neat deal. Again, baptism is water and word. And we're not here to judge people's baptism, but it's neat to know that we baptize. You know, a lot of people, we'll get to the Jordan River in a couple of weeks again, but I think it's important for us to hear, for Lutherans to know, because one of the main things, especially in the South or Central Texas, kind of where we're around a lot of other denominations, as it were, that believe in solely submerged baptism, which is fine. It's only about 180 years old, but it's fine. You can do that. But it's neat, when they say things like, why do you, baptize with pouring? The very first church, remember the apostolic church, if they were the apostolic church, what does that mean? Those people knew Jesus personally. They saw Jesus, right? The apostolic church was the church where the people actually still knew Jesus, and they had a font. And so, did they have a font because it was easier? Very possible. They're at the top of the mountain range. Might be because it was easier. It doesn't matter why it was. They thought probably the same thing. It's water and word. If you do it in a river, beautiful. If you do it from a font, it's okay. It's water and word, which is important. And so the font is a really neat thing to be found there. Let me go back real quick, or up one more. So, that's Bethlehem. That's where Jesus was born. Jesus comes into this world in a cave. He doesn't come into this world kind of in a barn. It's a cave. He's brought out of the cave. But that's important for a couple of different reasons. So the shepherds were sent, and we even see in one of the gospel messages that they went and they secured kind of the place of Christ. How would the shepherds have been able to do that? That's what they did, right? And we talked about this before. Shepherds circa 2,000 years ago, and the Second Temple period, were big, burly dudes. They were the toughest of the tough. These were the guys that were out living on the land. They were the cowboys of Second Temple period, right? They were the ones that wrestled animals away from their sheep. They lived off the land. They were tough guys, and a lot of times they were the kind of the people that society didn't want as much, kind of like the sailors and army men type of well, we like you better over here. You do great work because over here. And so it's neat that kind of the very first people called by Christ are these guys that kind of society doesn't want. But what could they do? These big shepherds come and they protect the place of Jesus. Why? Herod's trying to find him. He's trying to kill him. Wants to kill Jesus. And here these shepherds are called by the angels. Go, go. And so the shepherds are there. And so you can see now how they could, it seems it's a little bit more easy to understand. Shepherds standing out in front of the cave or even right inside the cave, which is what they did. They knew it. It makes sense how that is an important part of the story. If it's just a barn, they're just kind of hanging out around the barn. It seems a little bit different, right? But it makes a little bit more sense to know that they're kind of coming into the mouth of the cave, and they're not letting anybody in. They know this is the Messiah. They're just as shocked as anyone else, right? Even they say, "We're just shepherds. What are you telling us for?" Right? It's important that they go. And so the very first people that Jesus calls are the people that society doesn't even fully understand or really want or like. And then Jesus is going to continue to do that throughout his entire ministry. So we're going to go from from Bethlehem. Remember, Bethlehem is 7 miles south of Jerusalem. It's a very quick, short trip. Bethlehem is also the place where someone else was born. Can anybody tell me? Anyone? King David. King David's town. It's King David's family's there. King David's family was kind of the proprietor of that area, which is why Joseph and Mary have to go back, right? For the census, they have to go back to their family. Jesus is from the lineage of David. He has to go back to Bethlehem. And so some people will say, well, unlike Nazareth and parts of Jerusalem, Capernaum, which we'll all talk about, sometimes people call into question and they'll say, well, the legitimacy of this place, as it was not necessarily established until maybe 100 years, maybe 150 years after Jesus. This place is not that. This place had foundations set 30 to 35 years after Jesus. Now, they still did it somewhat concealed, but why were they able to do that in Bethlehem, but not so much in Jerusalem or Nazareth? So Christianity was illegal, right? But Bethlehem is the city of what? David's family. That's all that lives there on this kind of mountaintop, this high area. So it's much easier for them to be the first ones to build it. That's why we believe that it's the first church built, because clearly two things. One, they're all believers, and they were there as Jesus is born. And number two, this is his family. There's not a Jewish sect that's living here. There's not kind of a Roman authoritarian living there. This is just Bethlehem. This is the family of David. And so if they want to build a little structure, they're not going to be in trouble. They're not going to face consequences. Whereas if you did that in Jerusalem or in Nazareth, you're doing that around Romans, you're doing that around Greeks, you're doing that around Samaritans, you're doing that around Jews. And some of those people may say, these Christians are building something, Christianity is illegal, and then you'd be killed. So the Church of the Nativity is the first one built for that reason, because they didn't have to worry about that. It wasn't a grand structure at first, it was a small structure at first, but it's the very first church built for the Christian faith. Any questions, comments? Yes.
Just to refresh my memory, now the Sea of Galilee is fresh water.
Yes.
The Jordan River is fresh water.
Fresh water.
So when it gets down to the Dead Sea,
It dies.
that's salt water, right?
Salt water.
So where did the salt come from?
It's a good question. No one knows. Google it, and Google will say, I don't know. It's the only thing you can Google, and Google doesn't know. Nobody knows. Nobody can understand. Scientists have some different ideas, but they can't fully understand it. Like I said, theologians, or I would say theologians, I would say some Christian historians would say it's Sodom and Gomorrah, because Sodom and Gomorrah happens right here, right on these cliffs tops, and everything is turned into salt. You have this high concentration of salt. I think if God rained salt and fire down from the heavens, it would be a lot of salt.
So if we're baptized right above it,
We are.
and our sins are all washed away into the Dead Sea, it's all bad stuff anyway.
That's right.
All of our tears are shed also, so that's where all the salt comes from.
There you go. That's a good one. Perfect.
Mystery song.
Mystery song. And we'll talk about it a little bit more. There will become fresh water once again someday. If you remember Revelation, Revelation says that when Christ comes back, there'll be an earthquake, and the water will flow out of Jerusalem to the Dead Sea and to the Mediterranean Sea. How can it do that? Well, it can do that because it's the highest place in Jerusalem, or in Israel, and so the water would have to flow. And two, there's one of the world's largest aquifers that was just found maybe 12 years ago now under Jerusalem. One of the largest aquifers in the world. And so we know, archaeologists, scientists, paleontologists will tell you, if there's an earthquake here, water will absolutely flow out of Jerusalem, which is pretty neat. Revelation tells us that, and we start to see these things. We'll talk more about that as we get to Jerusalem, though. But for Bethlehem, any other questions on Bethlehem?
Is there another Bethlehem closer to Nazareth up that way?
No.
There's no other city named Bethlehem.
No, there's two Bethanys, and there's two Bethpages, there's two Caesareas, there's no other Bethlehem. Any other questions? There's a Bethlehem, I think in Pennsylvania. Pretty sure, yes.
What was that, the story that you were telling me, there's that big column inside the church?
Yeah. It's hard to explain this. I will explain it. We have to go right afterwards, but there is in one of these columns, I don't think you can see it. It might be this one. this one, there are 4 finger holes. They look like finger holes. You can put your fingers in them. But the legend is that the Christians here in Bethlehem are in here when the Turks come and they're trying to destroy the church. And you can see the marble, the first 4 stanchions or first 4 pillars are still cracked to this day. And one of them has kind of a steel plate around it to hold it together. But they come in and they start with these big sledgehammers trying to bust down the columns, trying to destroy it. And all the Christians, all the people in Bethlehem go inside the church and they say, if the church is destroyed, we want to be destroyed with it. This is our church. And so they're all in there and they're praying, and then history says, or legend says, that bees flew out of this column. They prayed for deliverance but not death upon their adversaries. Bees flew out of this column and stung them until they left. And they left. And the holes are still there. You can see these holes. That's the legend. You can put your hands in it. A lot of people put their fingers in it. And they say a prayer. It's pretty neat. I don't know the truth of it, but I don't know that it's not true either. So, any other questions?
So are those pillars really slanted, or is that just the photograph?
No, that's a photo. I'm down low trying to get these, and I wanted to get some of the roof.
Okay.
That wood up there is so old. They're worried it's going to come down any day. They're trying to shore it up. It's really, really old. Anything else on Bethlehem or the birth? Yes, sir.
All these caves, are they natural caves or man-made?
Half and half, but there's a lot of natural. I think all of them started off natural, and some of them have been kind of excavated a bit. But they're all there's natural caves all the way throughout. And Lola can tell you, driving down the Jordan River Valley, if you look up on the hillside, you'll see all these little holes that are caves, still caves, all the way down the Jordan River Valley. There's thousands of these caves. Some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger, but there's lots and lots of caves.
And you can buy the traditional American manger scenes in Germany. Are they doing that just for American tourists? Or
Yes, you can buy them in Bethlehem too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because they're up front, right? They know. And then if you go into the back, it's like the more traditional cave-looking manger scenes. Yeah, you can buy them there too. They'll make it out of Bethlehem olive wood. This beautiful olive wood. They'll make the American one, which I bought one, so I still like the American Christmas nativity. But it's just. It's a historical fact. We know how shepherds lived and what they did and where they stayed and things of that sort. And it probably wasn't the first cave they stayed in. Realistically, as they're coming down the Jordan River Valley, tents were a lot of money back then. Tents were not easy, and they also weren't easy to bring with you. Tents were large, and you had large wooden stakes that went with them, not just stakes you went in the ground, but that would hold it up. So to have a tent, you were well-to-do, not only because you could afford the tent, but because you could afford the animals to carry the tent with you. And so remember, Paul is a tent maker on the side. That's how Paul makes his money. And so he's not making these little collapsible tents. These are massive tents. And so Joseph and Mary probably staying in many caves at night on their way down. They're staying in caves from the Sea of Galilee area down to Bethlehem. So when they get there, it's not a shock that they have to go stay in this cave. They weren't like, there's no room at the end. Oh my goodness. They probably never expected to get into the end, to be honest. I don't think Mary wanted to have the baby in a cave, but this was not a shocking thing whatsoever. This was something out of the ordinary, yes.
This cave, it was probably free, right, to stay in this
That's
cave?
right.
It's
Yeah.
not like
A B&B or.
It's not an air cave and cave. Yeah, it would have been free. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, hopefully, as we go through this, this is the very first start, and the idea is that next time you're reading this, you can kind of visualize it better as you read the scriptures. So, when you're reading it, you can kind of visualize and see Mary and Joseph in this kind of cave and lamb in a manger. There's a lot of significance to the manger. Manger's obviously where they fed the animals, except when there was a prize lamb. When there was a prize lamb, they would lay that prize lamb where in the manger, mostly so it wouldn't get nicked up. Couldn't get out of this thing. The other animals wouldn't bother it. What would the prize lamb be used for? For sacrifice, yeah. So when you had a prize lamb, whereas a shepherd thought that the lamb was perfect, this was a perfect lamb, whereas today we would use that for that's the one we want to use to mate, right? This is the perfect. They would lay it in the manger. It would stay in the manger. They would keep it there. They didn't want it to move. They didn't want anything because that was the lamb that they were going to take to offer for their sacrifice. And so the symbolism of Jesus being laid in the manger is a big deal. There's a lot there, Old Testament wise, as to what's going on. All right, I think that's it. If you have any other questions, you can. Nope, there's one more thing. And I'm the worst at this, but we will sign off. Goodbye, everyone.